Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you I have a brand new episode of Community Steel, and we're kicking off today's episode with the Panzerkampfwagen 9, and this is from High Ground. It weighs in at 37.22 tons. It is armed with a high-velocity 88mm gun with 204 millimeters of penetration, and it is designed for the late war period. And it's actually kind of got an interesting design because I can see little snippets of it that kind of screams German for the design, but I also see snippets of it where it's kind of Russian, if you will. And you'll see that here in a little bit. Right now I'm kind of scoped in trying to destroy someone here. Now I do have to say, when it comes to this thing, the armor's actually been fairly decent and the mobility's actually pretty good. But yeah, as you can see there, it's got that round dome turret of like a T-55, although I think it's maybe inspired by the Low, is my guess. Sorry, is it Louvre? I'm not too sure. But either ways, it is, I really like the vehicle. The gun seems to work fairly good. I mean, I'm struggling penetrating these vehicles here that I'm going up against, but man, I don't know. These IS-122s that Hamish did has kind of some bullshit armor going on. Now the mobility on the thing is actually relatively good. It kind of feels like driving almost like a modern main battle tank, where it's got pretty decent speed, top speed and acceleration and maneuverability. It's got good turn speed, things of that nature. Now when it comes to the gun traverse speed, that's pretty good. I found the gun depression to be pretty good. Nothing incredible, but it was very functional. It wasn't horrendous. I've definitely played with vehicles that had worse gun depression. We'll try and get one in. Yeah, as you can see there. And I got penetrated on the side of the turret. So yeah, it feels bad, man. But you can get a better look at this vehicle now that I'm kind of maneuvering around with this. I do like the details that they did. Of course, then I smash off the track guards because that's a thing now in Sprocket. But yeah, I mean, it definitely looks like it was inspired by a T-55 and maybe has some German features to it, if you will. But let's move on to the next one. And here I have the Otto Zuro from Random Tanker. This weighs in at 35 tons. It's got a 127 millimeter gun, and it's got 143 millimeters of penetration. And this is also for the late war period, and I could actually see some Sherman influence in this one, as instead of being a wider tank, it's a taller tank. It's kind of got the wider the rounded front glacis plate of like the M4A1. Although the engine deck is different, and so is the turret, but I can definitely see some Sherman influence here. That being said, though, while the gun did the trick for the most part, especially when flanking enemies, I feel at 143 millimeters of penetration for a 127 millimeter main gun is pretty freaking underwhelming. Now, it does have a pretty good reload speed, but honestly, I just imagine, I mean, it could be just me and I could be overthinking this, but I kind of feel like he probably could have got better performance actually out of a smaller gun, like a 76 or even a 90 millimeter gun. But either ways, I like the overall design of it. I think it's pretty cool, even though it's like I said, it's definitely got some inspirations from real world tanks here. Mobility though is kind of lackluster. I don't know if that's just the vehicle in general or if that's because I was trying to drive uphill here, but even on some of the flatter ground, not like there's much, but even on some of the flatter ground, the mobility didn't feel the most amazing in the world. And I found the armor to be fairly unreliable, but it would reliably bounce shots. I'm not sure if I'm really putting that in a good perspective, but armor not the best, but it would reliably bounce shots when hauled down. So it did okay there. Alright, the next one I have here is the SU-152 from Page, and hold up folks, before you get all excited, I know this doesn't look like an SU-152, but the pitch for this is it's an SU-152 of an alternate design. I think there was an SU-152 of an alternate design, and I can't remember the name of it to save my ass right now. But this weighs in at 39.65 tons. It is armed with a 152 millimeter gun. Surprise. And it's got 166 millimeters of penetration. Overall, mobility's fairly decent. Armor's okay-ish, but it does have its moments where it's lackluster. Now the sides is just horrendously bad, but you kind of expect that. But the front, yeah, there were some moments I was bouncing shots on the front. This is made for the mid-war period. As you can see here, I'm tearing ass across the plains here. Now gun-wise, gun was actually fairly decent. Reload was okay. The pen's a little lackluster, but it's a really big gun, and the problem with the 152 guns and anything large like that is they tend not to have a lot of penetration unless you have a really big shell to back it up. And the problem with that, though, is you also tend to suffer from a really slow reload. So it's kind of a trade-off here of, you know, do you have a lot of penetration or with a slow reload, or do you have a faster reload with less penetration? And kind of went with the slightly faster reload. I mean, it's still like a 15-second reload, but I got vehicles that's got damn near over 20 seconds. I think I have one that's almost 40. Either ways, let's move on to the next victim, and this is the T40MP from VVX2. This weighs in at 28 tons. It's armed with a 115 millimeter gun, and it's got 225 millimeters of penetration, and this is for the late war period. Now, I do believe, well, yeah, this is a tank destroyer, is the idea. It's supposed to be an assault gun. As you can see here, it's got a really wide gun arc, which really didn't surprise me because it's got a really wide build to it. The mobility is really awesome. It's got a lot of gun depression to it, although the gun arc kind of gave me some problems from time to time. It was kind of tricky to get it kind of zeroed in. Now the gun itself actually performed pretty well for me, so I was pretty pleased there with how well the gun performed. The reload speed wasn't horrendously slow, it was just good enough. The 225 millimeters of penetration was pretty good for the most part, except for right at the moment as I'm trying to shoot this vehicle. Whatever, there's nothing I can say about that. Now the interesting thing I find with the vehicle is it's actually got a cutout in the roof instead of having a fully exposed roof. And that kind of makes sense to help protect the crew from shell splinters and things of that nature, but then you can also open up the hatch to throw any shells out of it. So as a design feature, that's actually kind of a smart design feature from VVX2. The next vehicle I have here is a really good rendition of the King Tiger. This is the Tiger P from Vidar, and it weighs in at 69.8 tons. It's armed with an 88 millimeter gun, and it's got 204 millimeters of penetration. The armor actually did pretty good, and penetration wise, it's pretty effective penetration wise. Gun is really accurate. I was surprised of how mobile this is also for a King Tiger tank. So the mobility on this one in particular is good. And but I want people to understand too, as I say that, I wasn't really expecting anything for mobility. So, you know, extra points for the mobility, but I wasn't expecting much either. Now this is for the late war period, obviously. It's a Tiger B. I don't know why. Almost said P, but I was trying to say B. I don't know. Going full retard. But either ways, it's pretty good. I found the gun to be accurate. The reload speed, it's a little slow, but it works. You know, it's good enough because at least it can bounce shots, which is the big thing. It's actually got some survivability to it, as you can see here. They were bouncing shots off my upper glacis plate. And even some of the tanks with the larger guns were also bouncing shots off the upper glacis plate. So all in all, I think this is really good. Really good looking vehicle, really good model, just good general overall work on the vehicle. Now the next one I have here is from Coconut Cooler, and this is the IS2 1944, weighs in at 45.21 tons. It's got the 122 millimeter main gun with 192 millimeters of penetration. He's also got a 12.7 millimeter coaxial. Is it coaxial or is it turret? It's turret. Sorry, I'm shit, folks. So it's pintle mounted. And this is also for the late war period. Armor held up pretty good for me when I was doing the testing. The mobility was absolutely great. The machine gun was actually fun, and it was kind of fun when there was actually stuff I was destroying the machine gun with. I kind of wish they had more ammo, because when I was doing my testing, I actually did run out of ammo. But I have to admit, the machine gun was a lot of fun. As you can see here, I'm like sitting here watching me go nuts with the machine gun. It's like, God, that was so much fun. The reload speed on the gun is pretty mediocre, but it's a 122, so what can you expect? And for the most part, the tank just handled fine. I can't really say much more than, yeah, it's fine. It's an IS-2. You know, and honestly, the armor probably held up better than an IS-2. Or at least than I would have expected from an IS-2. So there you go. That's really all I can say about that one. Okay, the final one I have here, and I think it's been a while if I've ever done one at all. This is the T-72B3 from Some Guy. Yes, that's literally his name before anyone asks. It is Some Guy. And it's 41.75 tons. It's armed with a 125 millimeter gun. It does have the the pintle mounted MG modeled as well, and it's got 214 millimeters of penetration. Obviously, this is for the late war period, as this is one of the most modern renditions of the T-72. That being said, overall, it's fine. I liked it. Mobility was good. It's got a nice low silhouette, very well detailed, and it drives like a champ. The reverse speed I did find to be a little slow, but I kind of expected that for a T-72 design. So nothing to really write home about there. But as you can see here, it's really well done. Even has the smoke launchers as well as the cage armor around the rear of the tank. And the more modern ERA, I think it's the Relic, is what they put on the newer versions of the T-72. Just well detailed, really well done. But anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap today's video up with that. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.